Hey friends, welcome to Millennial at Midnight. And this is my ball python zombie. Oh, Bubby, you trying to give me kisses? So I appreciate all of you who come over from my regular channel and anyone who stumbled on here by accident. Thank you, welcome. On my regular channel, I do commentary on true crime. I'm mainly talking about Gypsy Rose Blanchard right now, and I also talk about pop culture and history. This channel, though, is just going to be more random interest stuff. Today we're talking about ZOMBI, and then we're going to talk about history because y'all know I have a deep, deep love of history, and I also have a passion for random collections. One of my random collections that fortunately my husband indulges is I love collecting historical books. And this one we're going to explore whenever I put Zombie up because I don't want to give a chance of him accidentally tearing a page. Ball pythons are native to the part of Africa called Benin. It's a really interesting place. And one of the fascinating things is ball pythons are so gentle. They are considered very, very sacred to some of the local tribes in Benin, Africa. And one of the traditions is if a ball python makes its way into a villager's home, the tradition is that they're supposed to give it water and a quiet place to just hang out until it's ready to move on. Another thing about ball pythons, they used to be called royal pythons because there was a time period in history when it was popular to wear them as jewelry. Because in any kind of stress state, they will just kind of ball up around your hand or your neck. Like he's not stressed at all right now. That's why he's just, kind of exploring around. He felt free to come up on my face and whatever. But yeah, if there's a lot of activity around things like that and they're stressed, they will just ball up. And back in the day, it was popular for royalty. Cleopatra was known to wear a ball python bracelet. This is a history book that was published in 1780, an Encyclopedia Britannica from real time almost. So yeah, we're going to read about Boudica in there. Zom's having fun. Ball pythons are considered a good beginner snake for people who want to get a snake because they're so gentle, but they're a good beginner snake as long as the beginner is able to have an enclosure that maintains the correct humidity. Ball pythons have to have a humid environment, about I think 60 to 80% humidity. We've had ours set automatically for so many years now, and they're monitored and everything. My husband takes care of them, and I can't remember offhand, but their humidity has to be perfect so that their shed doesn't get stuck. If their shed gets stuck and they can't fully shed, then their skin starts constricting them to where they can grow, they can get infections where it's trying to break through and the stuck shed's still on there. The reason I have Zombie, actually, he's not one that was surrendered to me by someone. I got him from a pet store, and I normally don't usually go buy snakes from pet stores, but Zombie was underweight. He had a snake mites infection that I had to treat him for and pull mites from in between his scales. And he also had stuck shed. He had not been getting good humidity and he'd not been able to shed properly. So yeah, I bought him to take him home and fix him up. My husband was oh, there he goes for the book. See y'all. My husband was my boyfriend at the time that I got him. He actually sent me with money to the pet store. And then whenever I came back with Zombie, he was like, you bought a snake and you bought the kind of snake that has all the flags that you're supposed to look out for and not buy so that you can get a healthy snake. But I wanted to save him. And of course, my husband approved. The Zombie is a perfectly healthy weight. He's doing great now. As you can see, he has no stuck shed. He has no fear. He loves to explore. Just living a happy little snake life. Something a lot of people who haven't handled snakes often assume that snakes are slimy like worms, and they're not. I don't know if you can see the light sheen off of Zombie here, but they feel more like a silky suede leather, kind of very soft and silky. Hey, Zom. Are you going for the glasses? It's storming outside, and often the snakes will shed whenever it storms. They have an instinct for that because how it was explained to me, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but how it was explained to me was that in the wild, if it storms and so it floods or something happens like that, They need to be able to easily get to higher ground, to a safe place, and they don't want to be stuck in the middle of shedding. So when they sense a storm is coming, they usually shed. Aw, he's just chilling, resting his little chin. Doesn't he look like a little puppy, y'all? Such a sweetie pie. Well, I'm gonna let him go back to his enclosure and chill out. And then we're gonna talk about Boudica. I'm gonna show y'all my history book. This book is massive, y'all. The leather is peeling a bit here. But see the gold detail around the edges? Oh, Dave, you can't have the leather. Back up, Bobby. That's not for you. And then when we open it, look at that, y'all. So that would have been done by very skilled ink artisans. Biographia Brittanica, volume the 2nd. The lives of the most eminent persons who have flourished in Great Britain and Ireland. London, printed by W.A. and Strawn. Look at that date, y'all. January 1st, 1780. But yeah, one of my random collections is I love collecting really old antique books. And this is Biographia Brittanica 1780 is the published date, January 1st, 1780. And it's just really freaking cool. And because of this damage, I don't have a clue why somebody drilled a hole through the book. But because of the damage, I was able to purchase it really, really reasonable and just read 1780 history as people got it right at that time. And it's so fascinating as a look back. Like I was saying in a video the other day, it's wild to realize, sometimes we have a tendency to feel like in the past things were so much better. People didn't have these stupid taxes and credit scores and all that crap. Well, it turns out they actually did. So I'm going to read a little bit of this story. It's Old English. It's really hard to read sometimes. The S's are all written as F's. And some of the words, sometimes it goes into Latin, and there's no way I can read it. I have no idea what it's saying. But yeah, let's check out the story, friends. So the part I'm on here is about Boudica whenever she mounted a resistance to Rome. And it tells the history of why. And in 1780, this was already a very ancient story. And so they're referencing ancient historians who were ancient in 1780, putting together the story. So it's really fascinating. Boudica, a famous British queen in the time of the Roman Emperor Nero. Whole story is related by Tacitus and Dion Cassius. She was the widow of Prosegatus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of these right. If I'm not, please feel free to correct me in the comments. I hope maybe you'll do it nicely because it's not intentional, y'all. She was the widow of, well, we're just going to say, King of the Iceni. And having suffered the most barbarous indignities from the Romans, she excited the Britons to a revolt. Accordingly, to the number of 120,000, with Boudica at their head, they attacked Camalodunum and slaughtered 70 or 80,000 Romans, committing the most shocking and unheard of cruelties. But Suetonius Paulinus, marching against them with about 10,000 men, a bloody battle ensued in which 80,000 Britons were slain, and the Romans gained victory with a very inconsiderable loss. The battle was fought the year of Christ 61 of Nero 8. Some have thought it was fought on the Salisbury Plain, and that Stonehenge was erected as a monument to Boudica. This valiant queen, whose person we shall give a description of in the remark, dispatched herself by poison. So I'm sure y'all know what that means. So down here where we have the notes, it says, she suffered the most barbarous indignities from the Roman. Her husband, in hopes to secure the protection of the Romans to his kingdom and family, had by his will made the emperor and his own daughter co-heirs of his great treasures. But it happened quite contrary to his expectations, for his kingdom and treasures became thereby a prey to Roman officers, who proceeded to such a pitch of brutality as to order his Queen Boudica to be publicly whipped, and the two princesses, his daughters, to be ravished by the soldiers. Oh, it goes into Latin there. I can't read that, y'all. Dion Cassius, who is thought to have paraphrased upon Tacitus in this story, makes no mention, however, of these personal injuries offered to Boudica and her daughters. But as the author cited in the margin, Tacitus, in relating the cruelties and injustices that the queen suffered, is worthy of belief against his own nation. So, it's 1780. They're writing in Old English. They have a strange way of wording it. But basically, they're saying one historian reported these brutalities against Boudica and her daughters, another one didn't. But the one who didn't report that he saw it said he believed what he heard, basically, even though it went believing that his own nation did a bad thing. But all war is brutal. But oh my gosh, some of the things that the Romans did to this tribe, I don't know that I can say everything in here on YouTube, y'all. She excited the Britons to a revolt. Dion Cassius had given us a long speech, which he tells us assembling the Britons together in order to animate them to take up arms against the Romans. She begins with observing that they could not be convinced how much liberty was preferable to slavery, and how much they were deceived by the fair promises of the Romans in preferring a foreign government to the laws and manner of their own countries, having sustained all manner of calamities since the Romans entered Britain. And he owns that the Britons themselves had been authors of their own misfortunes by suffering the Romans first to settle in the island. The historian places her on rising ground, dressed in a loose-bodied gown, with a spear in her hand and a hare in her bosom. Hare is spelled Hare, like the type of rabbit, so I assume she was wearing a type of fur at her chest. And unfortunately, the freaking drill hole of whoever desecrated this book before I bought it cuts out some of the actual description of what Boudica looked like, but I'll read what we can see here. Okay. Loose-bodied gown, spear in her hand, a hair at her bosom, something, something, end of her harangue, she lets flip, don't know, omen of success. So it sounds like she gave an amazing speech. It turned people's minds. She had help writing it, and the writer did her good. M. Ribbenthorius, who places the artifice of letting flip the hair immediately after her speech before that last battle. So that's a part that was cut out. I wonder what flip the hair means. I assume it was some sort of omen that they did for success. Oh, maybe a sacrifice. Besides the injuries offered to the family of the king, the Britons had other causes of discontent. The Roman veterans, being newly planted in the colony of Camalodunum, get driven the inhabitants from their houses, dispossessed them of their lands, and treated them as slaves and captives. And moreover, the temple, lately built in honor of Emperor Claudius, seemed to them the foundation of a perpetual tyranny. And as the Britons were animated with the hope of recovering their liberty, the Romans were discouraged by various omens. For the statuary at Camalodunum fell down without any apparent cause. Strange noises were heard in the court and theater. The sea looked bloody, and fervent, enthusiastic women foretold the subversion of that colony. So yeah, the Romans were getting freaked out by the spooks, the omens and the spooks. And Boudica probably used that to her advantage. What do y'all think? I bet she told the women, scare the hell out of them. Act spooky, y'all. Okay, so now we get to the really crazy part. And then I'm going to end after that with a little palate cleanser. Yeah, there's some really, really disturbing stuff here. The Britons committed the most shocking and unheard of cruelties. Tacitus only relates in general that they gave no quarter but destroyed the enemy by sword, gallows, fire, and crucifixions. Dion Cassius has particularized some of their cruelties upon this occasion. The men, he tells us, had their bowels cut out, and some of them were gored upon stakes and others boiled. The most noble and honorable of the British ladies were stripped naked, their PAPS sliced off and stitched to their mouths that they might seem feeding, and lastly were staked through their bodies. Boudica, with her daughters by her side in her chariot, rode from rank to rank, animating and encouraging the several nations. She told them, "This is not the time Britons had been victorious under the conduct of their queens, but that upon this occasion she considered not her royal descent, nor the loss of her riches and grandeur, but was come as a private woman to revenge the loss of liberty, the stripes inflicted upon her own body, and the violation of her daughter's charity, that neither age, sex, nor quality could escape the unbound lust of the Romans. However, that the gods had already begun to make them feel punishment that they deserved, and the entire defeat of one of their legions, and the terror which has seized the rest, that far from sustaining the efforts to a victorious army, they were not able to endure even the shouts of a great multitude, if the Britons did but consider their own strength and the causes of the war, they would be convinced they must either conquer or die, that for her own part, though a woman, this was her resolution, the men might live if they pleased and be slaves." She was a queen, y'all. Unfortunately, she didn't succeed, and I'm not going to read all the rest of the brutalities. I'm not sure how YouTube is going to feel about this video already. But unfortunately, as I read early on, Boudica didn't succeed in the very last battle where they almost beat the Romans, overthrew Rome, and ensured Celtic reign of the British Isles. She lost the last battle, and when she realized that she was going to be taken by the Romans, that they weren't going to win, that's when, as the writer said, she dispatched herself and her daughters. They basically went to be with her husband, with the king, rather than Rome. So yeah, this has been a bit of a heavy video, y'all, but it's really, really wild to read the history of what actually happened on some of these crazy, crazy things. So we'll go out with a little palate cleanser, and I hope everyone's having a good day. I hope you enjoy the new history reading, and have fun, y'all. So even though Boudica's ending wasn't happy and victorious, and her inspiring speeches have been disputed all the way back to 1780, she clearly did something as a leader that caused her to be revered and respected centuries later. She inspires art, she inspires writing. I've painted Boudica. There's a famous statue of Boudica in Britain, and people still are inspired by her leadership and her love of liberty to this day. And so even though it doesn't have the ending I would prefer, I love the story of Boudica. And I hope y'all enjoyed it too, and have a good day, friends.